Today is October 13th, 2022. Welcome to Native Calgarian. Oki, Naganago, Mekoche, Chestakom Aki, or Dekots Nagotine Siku. My name is Red Thunder Woman. My married English name is Michelle Robinson, and I use she and her pronouns. I'm speaking to you on the lands of the Niitsitapi, which is the Blackfoot Confederacy. The Blackfoot south of the imposed U.S.-Canadian border are the Blackfeet. North of the border are the Siksika, Gunai, and Bagani of the Confederacy. These lands are Treaty 7 lands, signed September 22nd, 1877, with signatures that include the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Wesley, Chiniki, Bearspaw Nations of the Stoney, and the Dene from Tsuut'ina. I acknowledge all First Nation, Métis, Inuit, status, and non-status across Turtle Island as the keepers of these lands. All non-Indigenous are treaty partners with the government signing on your behalf. Pride Month shouldn't be just once a month. It's really important to understand that the straight agenda and gendered violence was and is forced on this land by Christian outsiders. Land acknowledgements are critical for creating a safer space for Indigenous, honoring the host as a guest, acknowledging your role as a treaty partner in a so-called time of reconciliation, and hopefully one day an understanding of land back. It's important that land acknowledgements have meaning. I encourage all people to introduce themselves with their acknowledgement of their ancestors, stories of displacement, how you perceive your role as a treaty partner, a citizen of Canada, a refugee, or other land displacement, so we as Indigenous people know how safe you are to be around. If you won't pronounce your local Indigenous nations' names, you won't say your pronouns, your story of origin, won't acknowledge stolen lands, economic oppression, or your role in reconciliation, I determine how safe you are to be around my family, my community, and myself. Understanding land acknowledgements and their importance is Indigenous 101 because it immediately addresses colonialism, oppression dynamics, broken treaties, and lies taught today in Canadian schools nationally. That's why settlers and those who call themselves Native Calgarians or whatever town you're from show me you don't actually have Indigenous 101 understanding. So if you don't know what I'm saying, you don't want to hire me, that's fine. Read Jesse Wente's book, Unreconciled, chapter 13, pages 180 and 181, because it explains it perfectly. My Dene lineage roots me in the land of the Great Bear Lake tribe in Treaty 11. My name is Dekots Negotine Siku in my language. My people wore rabbit skin, so we've been referred to as the land of the hair people. I'm a native to Turtle Island, and my Dene nation is a visitor to this area of Clincho Tine Indahe in Satu Dene, meaning many big dog town, named after the Calgary Stampede. I was born in Calgary or in Blackfoot, Mokinstis, as Michelle Elliott, an English name which has afforded me privilege in an English colonial world. My mother is Northern Slave Dene or Satu Dene, but my Indian Act and Post status card by the Canadian government says Yellowknives Dene. My father, through him, I'm a daughter of the Mayflower and a daughter of the American Revolution, while having a Canadian Indian Act and Post status card, which is a colonial construct by Canadian policies meant to divide Indigenous peoples' inherent rights. Indigenous Two-Spirit or the Indigenous 2S LGBTQ2+ community and Indigenous women are on the bottom of the Canadian socioeconomic ladder because of colonial trauma, imposed poverty, racism, gendered violence, and land theft. As a Dene woman who has attempted to run after joining harmful colonial parties, spent money to be at expensive conventions, left my home to travel to those conventions just to vote on incomplete policies that still allow incarceration, a denial of justice, a denial of health services, racism, colonial trauma, and genocide of Indigenous and Black peoples, I have work to continue, reports to advocate for, and attempt to work within these systems meant to harm me and my community. I can't say, have a great long weekend, when the long weekend is because of my community mourning the loss of children that never came home, and those that did come home didn't come back whole. And we still have all these current drug policies and imposed Christian drug policies of abstinence programming, private healthcare, and justice systems built on racism, land theft, and British constructs that continue genocide on Indigenous people. I think of all of the folks that we've lost, and I hope that every podcast we honor their lives. I hope you see your role in the importance of stopping harm, and as a citizen, see your role in reconciliation too. I honor the Blackfoot as they have been so kind to me on my Red Road journey. Elder Red Crane taught me how to pronounce my spirit name in Blackfoot, and Leonard Kenny taught me how to pronounce my spirit name in Satu Dene. My humblest apologies to the Blackfoot and Dene language keepers and elders as I try to learn proper pronunciation Any mistakes or misinterpretation on language or the entire podcast will be on me. I encourage questions so that misunderstandings can be cleared up as soon as possible. I don't speak on behalf of all Indigenous. I just share my journey as I walk the red road. And I've been accused of not being kind, but I'm surviving genocide, so forgive me. And I have given free book clubs, podcasts, and info on my social media for years, as have so many others. At this point, it is willful to be ignorant on these issues. My Patreon account is Native Calgarian, where you can pledge and support. Thank you, previous donors, for showing your support. If you value listening or watching and can afford to give, thank you. To those who cannot afford to give, I'd love to hear from you at nativeyyc@gmail.com, where you can send in your comments or your questions. Also, giving a review helps whatever medium you're listening from. I have a YouTube channel that you can go and subscribe, and you can go to nativecalgarian.com for the latest podcasts and pin posts on social media. And for this specific one, I really encourage you to go to YouTube because you're going to see a slideshow. And for those who are not on YouTube, don't worry, we'll talk about it as we go. Today, I'm really, really honored to have two folks with me who are from the city of Calgary, but more importantly, they're my Indigenous brothers and sisters. So I am going to let Sherry introduce herself, and then I'll let Harold introduce himself.
Well, thanks, Michelle. My name is Sherry Kellogg. I am an Indigenous Relations Consultant with the City of Calgary. I forgot to say okay, Tensei, Ambawastich, Dinisida. I've been employed with the city for 23 years now, and I'm currently working in the Indigenous Relations Office, and I'm one of the co-leads for the Indian Residential School Permanent Memorial Project, which we're speaking about today. I am a member of the Big Stone Cree Nation, which is in the Treaty 8 territory in Northern Alberta on my maternal side. I'm of mixed ancestry. I want to highlight that residential schools affect all of us. Every single Indigenous person in Canada has been impacted by residential schools in some way. My birth mom was a residential school survivor, and I was part of the 60s scoop. So that's just a little bit about me, and I'll turn it over to my coworker Harold now.
Good morning. My name is Harold Horsfall, and originally from the Pasqua First Nation. So it's just outside of Fort Capel, northeast of Regina, about half an hour drive. My mom went to the Lebret Residential School, so we're Cree Soto. But I'm born and raised in Calgary. So the manner in which that I come to know myself as an Indigenous person or a person, is in the Calgary area. So thank you for having us here today, Michelle.
Oh, I'm really honored to have you both here and to talk about the most important thing, because like Sherry said, you said we are all affected. My family so we're from way up north, and because of the way the Mackenzie River goes, they grabbed all the kids and they put them in Fort Providence Indian Residential School. It's a Catholic one, Sacred Heart. And that's where my great-grandparents and my granny went. And then I found out later that my aunt and my uncle went to one kind of closer to Yellowknife, an Anglican church one. I can't remember, some hall, Bompass Hall. And that was the one that they attended. So I hate that this is a part of our life, but it is. And prior to the 215 graves that were rediscovered in Kamloops, I was giving presentations showing my, and in Fort Providence, the Indian Residential School is gone. But we all know, and we knew then, that they weren't properly buried, everybody. So they have this monstrous tombstone that's there that lists all the names of all the children, all of the adults, everyone who died there. And it was written pre-TRC. So it's very, they just died of disease. What? They died. I don't like it in the way they frame it. So my hope is that they'll put up a little more truthful way to say it. But at the same time, at least they did it. Long before the TRC came out and said, you should do this, it was already done. So, I was showing people this, and I don't know if they just didn't understand or what it was, but when the 215 graves were rediscovered, spoke and told us, and Canada was like, oh my God, I'm so in shock. it really showed me they also didn't read the TRC, because the 94 calls to action are very clear about this. So to me, I have a lot of respect that you both were in an institution that I guess was in denial of the truth for that many years, and you're still doing this good work. So I'm really honored to have you both on here. And obviously we all seen here in Calgary, everyone just immediately put up a small little memorial site with tiny little shoes. And while that's protected right now, your job, your task right now is to create a new memorial, one that is permanent and won't, get kicked or set on fire or anything like that. So yeah, if you want to talk about it from your point of view, we'll go from there. Who would like to speak first?
Super. Well, I think Harold will share his screen, please, and we will just go over our presentation channel and view the presentation so you have a visual of what we're referring to here. We're just waiting for it to load, and here we go. So I think we'll get, so Michelle, you're sharing your screen then? It looks like. Sorry, I can't hear you. Well, I guess we'll get started, Harold. So both Harold and myself, as Michelle was mentioning, are the co-leads for the Indian Residential School Permanent Memorial with the City of Calgary. On the main screen here, we have our large orange flag. We do an aerial salute with this orange flag on this, with the city's Orange Forest National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, and on the flag highlights all the names of the children that passed from the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation. However, there is some blank areas on the flag too, which honor those children whom names we do not know and have not been discovered at this time as well too. So that's what the flag is about there. So maybe we'll just go on to the next screen, please, Michelle. So this, the City of Calgary, I'll just go over this page here. So the City of Calgary's White Goose Flying Report came out in 2016, and that was the city's response to the 94 calls to action. And it highlights specific calls to action which the city needs to address within our organization. And one of those calls is calls to action number 82, which is to establish a permanent memorial and commemorate residential school survivors within this municipality. So last fall, City Council passed a motion that we start working towards this memorial and allocated $1 million to go towards the memorial as well. Harold?
Sure. Let's go to the, yeah. So we're looking at the temporary memorial. So the temporary memorial, as we're referring to it, is the memorial of shoes and teddy bears and etc. that has been organized by the grassroots Indigenous community and placed onto the steps of the municipal building or city hall. And so what we want to do is we want to be able to incorporate. It was the memorial, the temporary memorial, was put up in honor of the first 215 children that were discovered at Tecumloops Tuishwetnik in Kamloops of May 27, 2021. Yeah, so that's really what started this whole thing. And as a result, our city council gave us $1 million in order to construct a permanent memorial. Let's go to the next slide. Go ahead, Sherry.
One thing I might highlight about the temporary memorial as well too is that just to assure the community, it has been decided within the city that the temporary memorial will remain there until the permanent memorial is constructed. Because we understand that there's been a lot of prayers, ceremony connected to the temporary memorial, and that's actually one of the questions which we ask in our engagement sessions is around the temporary memorial. So just on the next slide, we want to provide a brief overview. Some people, I know that we are talking about the project right now. However, we've been working on the project for a number of months now. Mostly it's been internal staff within the city. So once the City of Calgary passed the motion to create a permanent memorial, and Harold and I were designated as co-leads of this project, the first thing we knew that we had to do was to establish an elders advisory group. of elders, knowledge keepers, survivors who represent this ancestral territory and also urban Indigenous people to guide us in a good way and to do things properly when it comes to the progress of this permanent memorial. So that was the first thing that we did. We also, within the city of Calgary, we had to do things like a project charter, which highlights timelines and how we're going to move forward. So we have done that as well too. And we also have an engaged team at the city of Calgary. And so why do we have an engaged team? Because they record everything, all the input that the community provides around design and location for the memorial. And we need that because what we will do is we'll compile a what we heard report and we'll present that back to the community. This is what we've heard, so that's why we really encourage and emphasize Indigenous people in Calgary to get your voice in, to provide your input. It's really important that people do that because this memorial is community built. It's not city built. We have the funding. We're managing the project, but it's all based on the feedback from the community on the design and location. So I guess we'll go on to the next slide here, please, Michelle.
Sure. Okay, so going on to our project timeline, yeah, as Sherry mentioned, all of the work that we did when starting in November of 2021, after the budget was allocated and announced, we just did the administrative tasks like creating project charter, and so that's just all of the things that will be in. And as Sherry already mentioned, the actual location and the actual design of the memorial, we want to talk to the community. So this is going to be one of my repetitive messages. In that when we engage, and what we're doing now, and engagement is open now until December, and Sherry and I have booked 9 hours. We've set aside 9 hours per week to get to talk to as many Indigenous Calgarians, people in and around Calgary that are Indigenous as we can, so that we get the location ideas, we can have this whole discussion, this whole conversation with people in the community. So the big takeaway from all of this in our what we're sharing here today is that we want to engage with you. We want to talk with you, and we're prioritizing people that have been affected directly by residential school. So we did start with some pre-engagement. So that was just our way of getting out there into the community, getting to know how people have felt. One of the pre-engagement engagements that we had was with a group of people who were there were a lot of Cree Soto from Saskatchewan, Treaty 4 area, just like myself, and it was a really good session. But we realized there was a lot of trauma, and a lot of people wanted to talk about that. And so with our engagements, it's not that we want to talk about the trauma. We don't want to bring any of that up. We want to think about a way to commemorate and a way to have this for the future for our children as we go forward. As one of our elders said on our elders advisory group, Marina Crane, she said that well, I'm not going to be here for it, meaning, eventually we're all going to pass, right? And so this is really about the future. So anyways, so where we are, we're at the first round of community engagements, and that's where we're going to get input on the location and the design of the memorial. Again, Sherry and I are just facilitating the process, and for the design and the location, we need to hear from the community. We're going to come up with a draft design and a location, and then we'll go back to the community in January to April of 2023 to say, here's what we heard. And then we're hoping that that all goes well and that we can announce our final design and location by June 2023. Sherry?
I might add as well, paralleling this engagement process that we're in right now, we will also, based on what we hear from the feedback in the Indigenous community, we'll be starting a procurement process to hire an Indigenous landscape architect and or designer, depending on the feedback that we receive. We strive to have this project Indigenous led from start to finish. So I wanted to highlight that as well too. I know, as Harold was mentioning, we'll go back to community in 2023 for validation on the draft design and location, with the goal that we'll be able to bless the area that was decided for location, start construction, and have the memorial completed by the summer of 2024. So I just wanted to highlight that as well. So just going on to the next slide with our elders advisory group. We want to keep this engagement process as open as possible, of course, because it is community built. However, our elders advisory circle did want to establish just a couple parameters when we go forth in our phase 1 engagements. And these parameters are that the memorial must be accessible. So what we mean by that is geographically accessible. So maybe around downtown or surrounding area where people, who have to take public transit or walk, they're able to go there without it being on the outskirts of town, but also physically accessible. So for our elders, survivors, and just people that are physically limited, it has to be accessible for them. So that's a must-have. It must also be inclusive. So what that means is recognizing and honoring First Nation, Métis, and Inuit, of course, from this ancestral territory, but also across Canada, because we know that many of our urban Indigenous people, we're all very diverse, come from very different places. So it's inclusive in that way as well, too. It must include the spirit of the temporary memorial, and in some way, again, acknowledging that there's been a lot of ceremonies and prayers, feelings, connection to the temporary memorial. But how do we do that? How do we incorporate the spirit of the temporary memorial into the permanent memorial? And of course, it must be a safe place to grieve. And so that's one of the parameters as well. So I guess we'll just go on to the next slide, please, Michelle.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, and then just on the last point there in the parameters, that the design and location ideas are obtained from conversations with the Indigenous community. And when I say the term Indigenous, I always include Métis people, whether it's capital M or lowercase m. So yeah, it's like having home cooked meal versus going to McDonald's, right? The energy that goes into a home cooked meal makes the meal taste better, I think, or I believe, than it would going to McDonald's. So that's the kind of thing, is like we really want to talk with the community and really have everyone's input, have everyone kind of touch this, as it were, quote unquote, touch this, so that it really contains all of that energy. And that's one thing that I believe. So then in that, and as part of scoping it out, we didn't want to go to the community with a blank page. So if you've ever sat down to write a story, the worst thing from my experience, speaking from my own experiences about writing, is looking at a blank page. Nothing is more frustrating for me personally than a blank page, because there's so much information, but where do you start? So that's what we're doing here, and that we've scoped out a couple potential park places under the advice of our Elders Advisory Group to help explain what it is that we want to do. So this one location that we're looking at is a slide where we do our Orange Shirt Day ceremony at Fort Calgary. It's looking east towards the fort from 6th Avenue, from 6th Street. Southeast, and yeah, that could be one potential location. The challenge there, though, is that there are right behind it is it's a concert ground. So the annual Country Thunder and the Stampede will usually have concerts there. So I'm not sure about uses, if that would be the best place to have a memorial. But that said, that is one place that is on the radar. So it's located by the confluence, so right at Mohkinsis, with Chispa Oyare, Gutsitse, or Tuscany. So tapping the elbow, that's one of the most important things of that place. But then there we can also partner. There are partnership opportunities with the Indigenous Gathering Place and with Fort Calgary, and it's a big location in a very large space. Next slide, Sherry.
So again, as Harold was highlighting, the Elders Advisory Circle just recommended that we scope out some park spaces just as possibilities or options, give people examples. So the other area that would be available is this location right in front of City Hall. Actually, there's that fountain there that hasn't been working for quite a long time, actually. It's this area there as well too. So the benefits of this type of area is, of course, it's where the temporary memorial is. It's visible. It's right in front of City Hall. A lot of people do gather in front of City Hall for various reasons already. So again, this is a possibility, a consideration on a potential location for the permanent memorial. So next slide, please. So this is just an example. When it comes to the permanent memorial, there's the questions of, is it a monument? Is it a park space? Is it a gathering space? There's different possibilities. All is being allocated towards the construction of a permanent memorial. We are utilizing 10% of that budget towards engagements. However, we wanted to give people just an example of Dignity of Earth and Sky, located in the US. This memorial took 3 years to build. And it also costed $1 million US. So we wanted to highlight this just to, again, just give examples of how much it really does cost to create a memorial, right? And how long it actually takes to construct. So these are just considerations when we're talking about the design and location of the memorial.
Perfect. And I'll jump in there too. In that last from that last slide, again, the big question there that we really want when we're engaging with you, especially because then there's a conversation. So when we do our community engagements, and if you have a session, so we prefer no more than 30 people and at least 5 people, 4 or 5 people. So anywhere in that range. And again, we have Sherry and I have 3 places 3 times per week from now until December bookmarked. So if you know at least 4 other people or all the way up to 29 other people, let us know, reach out. Our contact information, we'll give it to you at the end, and then we'll come and talk to you. And then when we come and talk to you, we'll get into that part a little bit in the next slide or two. But just to get a feel for it. So here, the picture that I have is if we had an Indian residential memorial gathering space. This is a picture that I took from the Kwanlin Dun First Nations Kwanlin Dun Cultural Center that's in Whitehorse, Yukon. So me and a friend of mine, we drove up there last year going to hunt some moose, and it was a long drive. It was about 24 hours. So we drove there. We didn't see any moose on the drive. We hunted. We didn't see any moose. We drove back. We didn't see any moose. So we didn't see any moose. But I got this picture, and this picture is of a sacred fire. And when it's lit, members of the community there, the Indigenous community there, know that they can go down, and Chief and Council will also be there, and that they know that they can talk to Chief and Council and that they will be heard. So is that what we want to do? Is more what we want to do to commemorate and memorialize Indian residential schools? Do we want to make a place for us to come together, or do we want to have a statue, or a little bit of both? And these are the kind of things that we want people thinking about, so that when we do engage with you and we do talk to you, then those are the ideas that come out, and they record the information so that we can draw on it for the ideas. Again, going into the design and the location on those ideas. And it's hoped, if everything goes well, because this is a new process, we're kind of building it as we fly it, that those ideas become crystallized and they go into the procurement, the request for proposals that will go out, so that we can have members of the community bid on and hopefully be successful on building this memorial. So next slide, and Sherry.
Okay, so again, we've highlighted several times that these phase 1 engagements are around design and location, of course. The phase 1 engagements, again, are going from now until December, and we're trying to be as flexible as possible when it comes to the engagements, understanding that some programs might only operate at nighttime. So we're flexible, and really what it comes down to is just contact Harold and myself, let us know what your needs are, and we will work with you on that. Again, ideally we'll have, around 30 people in the engagement session, but again, we are flexible that even if there's 10, we'll work with that, right? The engagement sessions might not just be as long as 3 hours, right? Which is fine. In the engagement sessions as well, one of our elders from our Elders Advisory Circle will also attend with us to provide an opening address, of course, for the engagement. And then we'll also have a IRS support worker attend as well too. And that's just in case things might come up and somebody might need more one-to-one support in that area. So we just are trying to create, as much as possible, a safe space for people to share within the engagements that we're conducting around the design and location. So I guess we'll go on to the next slide, please. And so this is our contact information. So again, my name is Sherry Kellock, and I'll just read out my email. So that's Sherry, SHERRI, Kellock, KELLOCK, at calgary.ca, and my work phone number is 587-888-7691. And Harold?
Yep, so I'm Harold Horsfall, and my email is HAROLD, so that's horse the animal, fall the season, one word, at calgary.ca, and my phone number is 403-510-0147. And we do have an engaged portal. So even if you can't make the time between now and December to talk to us, or you can't get a group to talk into, you can still go onto the engaged portal. We do have it listed here, and I will read out the address for you. So it's just in your search bar, engage, engage.calgary.ca /IRS Memorial. So it's engage.calgary.ca/IRS Memorial. And if you go there, you can navigate to a couple of the tabs, especially on location, design, and temporary memorial. And each of those tabs has all of the questions that are the core of our engagement. But it's better for us to engage with you, because then we can get the conversation. That's where the good stuff is, because that's happening between people, right? There's that kind of exchange, and there's energy exchange of ideas and so on and so forth. Whereas then with just answering the questionnaire, it's just you and a machine. But that said, the Engage portal is pretty good. The hardest part about answering those questions is actually the CAPTCHA animations to prove that you're not a machine. So that's the best part. And again, we want to hear from you. We want to talk to you. We can come to you. You can host us, or we can host you. You know, we're really easy to work with. We just want to meet people where they are, and just really, this is about something that impacts all of us. And we just want to make sure that we do a good job, and that we reflect as many people's interest in this as possible.
I might also add that the reason as well we have the Engage portal is, again, we're trying to reach as many people as possible. And of course, we can only reach so many people for in-person engagements. And that's why we really encourage people that if you can't attend an in-person engagement, we totally understand. Then we really hope that you can go to the portal and again fill out the questions around the design and location, because all of the information, whether it be from an in-person engagement or from the online portal, is all going to be compiled into the What We Heard report, which will go back to community in 2023.
For sure. And then all of that information from the What We Heard report, once it's accepted by the community, or you know, that we repeat it back, this is what we heard, and people say, yep, that's what we told you, those items form the basis of, or the goal is for those items to form the basis of our procurement, which will be all public process. And then so that's to help facilitate you know, a little bit of economic reconciliation as well, because if we're not on equitable grounds, then how can we actually achieve reconciliation? So that's one of the points that we're actually moving towards. And again, this is something that impacts all of us, and I just want to honor these children and the experience and the trauma and tragedy that we've all experienced, and some of us continue to experience going forward, just to do our part to make the future more livable for future generations.
Well, that is wonderful. Thank you both. I've been lucky enough, obviously, to be in person with you a few times already, and I've been trying to share some of the upcoming ones, like at Muskanawa that's coming up, just to let community know that are following that can see it, because I think that it's just really important we try to engage with as many people as possible. And I really applaud what you're doing. I think it's long past what needs to be done, but here we are, and I think you're trying to do it in the best way, and I'm really grateful that you came here to tell everybody else. Obviously, all of the resources that you've given us, I'm going to put in the description so that folks who are listening through the podcast can click on if they're a local Calgarian, Indigenous Calgarian that wants to participate in any capacity. So I just thank you both for coming on here and telling us what you're doing. And I give you many prayers and strength as you go through it, because it's just the most important work I think that we can start doing. And as you talked about procurement, I talked to Courtney Wolcott about Aaron Paquette's work up in Edmonton of creating a framework for art and for installations that are through the lens of the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People. And I hope that is something that eventually will happen with our procurement process as we move forward. And, you know, I can already picture an Adrian Stimson or somebody putting together a beautiful piece, or maybe a Heather Morageau making a medicine garden so that there's sage there and a place to smudge. So, and I love the idea of a fire, having a place that you can light a fire if necessary and needed, because I think many folks across Turtle Island, they have a 4-day sacred fire in cases that are necessary. And I wish we had more options to that. I started doing them in my backyard, but that's, you know, every Indigenous people, every Indigenous person has the inherent right to practice their culture, and still under the framework of colonial laws, in a lot of cases we can't. So I really applaud the work you're doing so that we can start creating that space and start creating that, dialogue of this is how we work together as treaty partners on reconciliation. So thank you both.
Sure.
Anything else? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, if I could add, there was one thing there were two things there. The first one is on Muskanawa and other public engagements. Again, by no means, if you can't make the Muskanawa or it's full or whatever, that does not mean that you will not be heard. Contact us, email, call us, and we can set up a session directly with you. So there's no panic there. We really want to, if we can talk to all of the Indigenous people possible. Sherry kind of cringes when I say this, but I'll do it if there's the interest. And that leads me to the second point. And if we do not hear from you, we won't have your input. And so it's really, it'll be unfortunate. It'll be a missed opportunity. So we really, really want to hear from you. So thank you.
Right on. Sherry, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I just want to thank you again, Michelle, for giving us the opportunity to talk about the Permanent Memorial Project on your podcast. We really appreciate it.
Well, trust me, it is my honor, and at the very minimum I should be doing to honor our people and those who survived and those who didn't. So to me, it's like, you have to do this. I have to do what you ask. Right. No, thank you both for being on here. And, you're welcome to stay as I do my exit. And of course, we'll be listing all of your contact information. And I think that you've really tried to open it up as much as you possibly can to folks. And hopefully moving forward, you'll get more input. I hope it's worthwhile coming on the show so that more people hear it. And then I guess non-Indigenous understand the process that we're going through in order to try to achieve this. So thank you both for coming on and explaining it.
Thanks, Michelle.
Right on.
Thank you.
Yeah,
hi.
thank you. Oh, honored to be here with you both. So I guess I gotta get out of this slideshow here.
All right, I'm gonna go to my next meeting. Have a good day. Thanks.
All right, so I'm really glad that folks were able to hear from the City of Calgary themselves about what it is that they're doing. I hope you consider contributing in the best way that you can. For folks who are non-Indigenous, I really encourage book clubs, as you all know. We just finished Res Rules. We're going to be doing the National Inquiry chapters 7 and 8 of Volume 1A for November 14th. December 12th is Standoff by Bruce McIver. Love to have you join the Reconciliation Action Group as well, so that we can continue to hold community and all levels of all orders of government to account on the work that needs to get done. And sometimes, settler politicians don't make it a priority. I'm proud that this podcast has given solutions, cultural safety training, and cultural first aid, and all of them to create a safer space for Indigenous, people of color, those with disabilities, and to us LGBTQ+ to speak. I want to say thank you to Cheryl Ward, Chelsea Branch, and Alicia Fritkin of heretohelp.bc.ca for creating What is Indigenous Cultural Safety and Why I Should Care About It. Their work and those cultural action tools are available, so please support Indigenous work like that as part of your reconciliation work and settler understanding. I'm just lucky enough to highlight and repeat things like that here, and if you were to Google it, there are even more resources out there. Internalized racism and lateral violence is another form of violence Indigenous and marginalized folks face by the structure of systemic racism imposed on these lands. And you can go to racialequitytools.org. They have tons of resource files, and there's one by Donna Bevins on what is internalized racism. And I encourage any group from a marginalized group to participate and understand that, so that we constructively call out pretend Indians, but at the same time, focus our work on the institutions that are the colonized institutions that are still oppressing us. Do's and don'ts for bystander intervention by American Friends Service Committee. That's afsc.org. They have lots of information that you can use in order if you see or experience racism. You can report it at actaendracism.ca or even text at 587-507-3838 if you're here in Calgary. Indigenous people have been talking about our issues, sharing our traumas and reports commissions on public hearings, just so it can be regularly disregarded. No more. Honor our words, honor the treaties, listen to politicians and their policies and platforms. They don't recognize marginalized in their budget with Gender Equity Plus. If they are cutting violence prevention programs, services, Indigenous education, uterus health choices, gay straight alliances, lack of human rights for migrants, immigrants, folks with disabilities, know that your vote to that person or party directly negatively impacts marginalized people. Demand that they implement the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action, the recommendations of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, the multiple reports about child welfare reform and violence prevention, and now 231 calls to justice from the National Inquiry. Provincially in Alberta, the Kenney government created 113 pathways to justice. So all the blue voters should be holding your blue MLAs to account. Follow the new Premier's Council on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, especially with our new Premier. Municipally, we have the White Goose Fine Report. Denying these reports is a form of abuse called gaslighting. Our people are experiencing extreme racism in the educational, health, justice, media, educational institutions in general, with multiple reports that say the same thing. Demand change from election platforms and politicians. If they don't understand colonialism, racism, privilege, and sexism, they literally have zero business running. It should be understood by all parties, local politicians, community organizations, sports clubs, and the public. Google articles on how non-Indigenous Canadians become allies. If you're experiencing emotional distress after anything we talked about today and need to talk, there is the First Nation and Inuit Hope for Wellness helpline at 855-242-3310. There's also a website at hopeforwellness.ca with a little text option. If more related to missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit, you can call 844-413-6649. It is toll-free, 24-hour support. And if you're non-Indigenous, there are distress center lines in your area, usually a functioning 211, or you can call 833-456-4566. The 60 Scoop Indigenous Society of Alberta is ssisa.ca, and locally here in Calgary, we're going to have a march on October 16th. Again, if you are 2S LGBTQ2+, there are specific supports for you. The Trevor Project has one for youth at 866-844-7386, the Trans Lifeline at 877-330-6366, and you can go to lifevoice.ca for crisis supports if you would prefer to look up some different ones. I've been lucky enough to have folks coming on and talking about the new policy changes that are happening here in Calgary when it comes to the drug poisoning crisis. And I want to encourage people to never use a loan. If you are using a loan, there are two apps that you can possibly use, the Brave or the Doors app. And there's also a national overdose response service at 888-688-NORS for support. Strongly support Indigenous people who are status. In Alberta, you can get Narcan for free. You can get one a day. Just talk to your local pharmacist. Every single Albertan can go to any pharmacist and get a naloxone kit with no questions asked. I'm asking you to look at people around you as human beings. If they're asking for money at your car, offer them your naloxone kit, because I give away mine at one a day, no problem. And I wish there were so many more for us to give away. Violence is my everyday reality. Every Indigenous generation has faced it. This is self-care, how I take my power back. This is why I started this podcast, to speak freely without interruption, tone police, leadership shaming, gaslighting questions, as many people don't want to hear Indigenous opinions, but sure want to tell us theirs by people who know nothing about Indigenous colonialism, constant surveillance of our people, our protest, our vigils, and our rights. I and many others share info on microaggressions daily. so it is unacceptable to say them anymore. Learn about being trauma informed. Folks like me are dealing with internalized racism and gatekeeping, surviving off that status quo, people who are in their trauma. So, people are trying every single day to deal with internal, external racism. And, these are barriers that I don't think non-Indigenous people quite understand. And this is like just a skiff of it. Masicho to my ancestors, to my granny, my mom, what strength looks like through your example. I want to thank my dad for teaching me to be strong and blunt, my stepmom for showing me what proud culture is through her Austrian family and roots and stepping up and teaching me to be a proud Calgarian. It is through her I am a second generation proud Calgarian. Thank you to my husband, Darcy, Big Buffalo Rockman, for producing and editing the show. On top of being my husband, my childhood friend, the father of our child, and support down my journey of the Red Road. He has witnessed decades of sexism and racism. And to our child, Thunder Pipe Necklace Woman, we are blessed to learn from you daily, and we are honored you chose us. You give me daily accountability to be a better and stronger person. I hope my family will be proud in the future of us trying to discuss these present day issues in a way that they will understand. My Patreon account is Native Calgarian, where you can pledge and support. Thank you, previous donors, for showing your support. If you value listening or watching and can afford to give, thank you. To those who cannot afford to give, I'd just love to hear from you at nativeyyc@gmail.com, where you can send in your comments or your questions. We also have a YouTube channel that you can go and subscribe. Go to nativecalgarian.com for the latest podcasts and pin posts on social media. And I want to end by giving side eye to those Calgary rabbits. You're lucky I'm not Tradish. My beautiful cousin responded, or you'd be in my dish. So thanks folks for listening.